Good afternoon and welcome to Engage in Trade Earth Day 2022, Sustainability in St. Louis. My name is Stella Sheehan and I am the Deputy Director here at the World Trade Center St. Louis. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon on this Earth Day. Before we proceed with our regularly scheduled programming, we have a very special surprise this afternoon. We're joined today by the World Trade Centers Association Communications Manager, Chanel Kasich. Also joining us are my colleagues Tim Nowak, our Executive Director at the World Trade Center, Betsy Cohen, the Executive Director of our St. Louis Mosaic Project, and last but certainly not least, Rodney Krim, our CEO and President of our parent division, the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. Chanel, over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Stella. Just as a brief introduction for myself, my name is Chanel Kasich. I'm the Communications Manager at the WTCA, and I'm pleased to share that the World Trade Center St. Louis is the recipient of the 2021-2022 Champion Award for Sustainability as part of our Champions Awards program. As a brief background about the awards program, it was designed to recognize members across the WTCA's network of more than 300 highly connected and mutually supporting businesses and organizations in nearly 100 countries, who most exemplify the association's core values and contribute to its mission. This year's competition featured 18 nominees who were nominated by their fellow WTCA members, while the final winners were selected for their contributions to the network across 4 categories: connectivity, reciprocity, network support, and sustainability. And of course, the coveted Member of the Year award exemplifying the values, vision, mission, and goals of the association. So with that, again, we are thankful to WTC St. Louis team for their ongoing commitment to drive the future of global trade and investment. And on behalf of the association, we are pleased to award the team with the 2021-2022 Champion Award for Sustainability for its Mosaic project to integrate immigrants into the St. Louis community for equal opportunity and gain the support of the international business community. Congratulations to the WTC St. Louis team.
Chanel, thank you so much. We're thrilled. And we literally, for all of you who are joining us, we literally found this out yesterday. That was when it hit the wire. And so we're grateful that you took the time here on last minute to join us and make this announcement. You know, this is a great honor for our organization, but also for St. Louis. And so many people who have really committed themselves to the Mosaic Project, to making St. Louis a more diverse community and a growing community connected globally. But we could not have done this without the work of so many, including our leader here, Rodney Krim, the CEO of the Economic Development Partnership, and of course, Betsy Cohen, the Executive Director of the St. Louis Mosaic Project. So I'd ask them both if you guys want to say a word or two.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this honor. I mean, just a wonderful recognition. We are a comprehensive economic development organization, and the World Trade Center and Mosaic are key components of that, kind of reaching throughout our region to really help all that we can to have thriving careers. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Betsy.
Thank you. This really is so meaningful. I recall several years ago coming to New York to share some of our programming about international spouses and what we do with international students and executives and how we make people integrate into our community for the betterment of all. And so being part of the World Trade Center Association was very meaningful. There was a lot of sharing. We brought ideas back, and I'm very glad that what we talked about has been shared and is being honored today. And our whole team and all of our collaborators, we are very appreciative. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for having me.
Chanel, tell everyone in New York we said thank you.
Thank you so much, Chanel. We are so honored and especially to receive this award on such an auspicious day, this Earth Day. So moving along, the theme for Earth Day this year is Invest in Our Planet, focusing on accelerating solutions to combat our greatest threat, climate change, and to activate everyone, governments, citizens, and businesses to do their part. From its very inception, Earth Day has been about civil society mobilization, In 1970, 20 million individuals mobilized to call for greater protection for our planet. Today, the event brings together more than 150,000 partners in over 192 countries. So just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. You will be muted for the duration of the presentation. However, if you wish to ask questions, please do so via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens, and we will do our best to get to those at the end of the formal presentations. I'm now going to ask our Executive Director, Tim, to do the introductions of our speakers.
Thank you, Stella. Again, good to see everybody. And again, we're just grateful for the work of this team, the World Trade Center, the St. Louis Mosaic Project, and everyone. And couldn't be happier with that news today. But moving on, as Stella said, it's my honor to introduce two of our special guests and key speakers who we have today. First, Kurtis Suellentrop. And Kurtis is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at WINCO Window. Based right here in St. Louis, WINCO specializes in maintaining building architectural integrity while bringing these beautiful buildings that we have located all throughout St. Louis into the sustainably focused 21st century. And they've been doing this for more than 100 years. Kurtis has a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Missouri-Rolla in mechanical engineering with an emphasis in design and thermodynamics. Think about that for a second, my goodness. And he actually developed the WINCO historic window system. So Kurtis, we're super thrilled to have you here today. We're also very honored, and I mean that with all sincerity, we're very honored to have Cara Spencer join us as well. Cara was named the inaugural director of the Building Energy Exchange in St. Louis in 2021. She has a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and brings experience from both the regulatory and the investment side of development. She's also, as if you all don't already know this, she was elected to the City of St. Louis Board of Aldermen in 2015 and continues to serve in that role where she represents the 20th Ward, a unique and diverse part of the St. Louis City. Prior to public service, Alderwoman Spencer spent over a decade and a half in the private sector consulting Fortune 500 companies in strategic planning, and following that, helped to develop a strategic plan for mid-sized developers in the city of St. Louis. Alderwoman Spencer, thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and turn my camera off and enjoy your presentations.
So here we go. Today we're here to talk about the Building Energy Exchange and energy efficiency tools for growth for the St. Louis region. The Building Energy Exchange St. Louis is really a hub of resources whose mission is to help the real estate community reduce energy consumption in buildings and position our region, the St. Louis region, as a resilient and carbon neutral region. Why are we focused on buildings? Buildings have a big impact. Climate change, as we all know, is driven by greenhouse gas emissions, and buildings make up 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions nationally. Here in St. Louis, buildings have an even bigger impact. 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions here in St. Louis come from our buildings. 80%. So climate change, as it's driven here in St. Louis, is really driven by our buildings. We really stand out in St. Louis when we compare to other cities. You can see here, LA, you've got 41% of greenhouse gas emissions coming from buildings, Columbus, Ohio, 58%, Salt Lake City, New York in the 70s, but St. Louis is really an anomaly here with 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions coming from buildings. We know we have a lot of work to do because of that factor, but we also know that reducing the enormous amount of energy consumed by buildings will have a massive impact on our collective carbon footprint. In order for us as a community to be considered a sustainable city, we really have to start with our biggest producers of greenhouse gas emissions, and that is of course, as we just went through, our buildings. So, but who cares, right? It is Earth Day, and we are talking about how we should be focused on our Earth. But really, why should we care about being a sustainable city? And now I'm going to go into some depressing news that many of you already know. But in this last census, St. Louis dropped out of the top 20 metros for the first time. We had slower growth than all but 3 of the nation's 50 largest metro areas. And this last update that came out just a few weeks ago was even worse. The city of St. Louis fell below 300,000 people in 2021, down 8,000 people in just one single year. And of course, this is a regional issue. It's not just the city of St. Louis. The St. Louis County fell below 1 million people. And we are really an area that is seeing a negative growth. And this is not typical for cities. You can see here that many of our peer cities are growing. And that's a trend that is not enjoyed by St. Louis. So, I think we really, as a community, need to be thinking about what's motivating people. We can't continue to lose population and be a successful community. So we have to attract to and appeal to residents and employers to come back to our region. And so when we think about what's really motivating people, particularly young mobile people, the new generation, what is it that they care about? And if I were to challenge you all to think about 3 things, big conceptual things that are important to the younger generation, a nimble generation, what is it? What are those things? Well, I would argue that climate change is probably in that list. It's not only the top of mind for millennials, but it's also top of mind for top executives. ESG, environmental, social governance goals are really driving major corporate investments because investors are demanding it. And so climate change is really driving decisions from college majors and products to buy, companies to work for, and yes, places to live. So, if we can start to address climate change from a large regional level, then we can start to rebrand ourselves as a successful, healthy, growing, sustainable city. We do have the makings of it, of being a sustainable city. The greenest building is the one that's already built, and we have a great supply of those. Our proximity to the water naturally gives us an edge in sustainability, both in access to water and logistics and transportation. It's very, very efficient to transport goods via the water. It's the most efficient way actually to do that. And our city has taken key steps to lay the groundwork for being one of the most sustainable cities in the nation. What are those steps? Well, the city in 2017 passed a benchmarking ordinance, which is an ordinance that requires large buildings disclose or share their energy consumption with the city. And building owners, by and large, did that. The first year we had compliance rate of over 50%, and that's a great thing. In 2019 and 20, the city passed solar EV readiness ordinances, and those were adopted by the city. And in 2020, the city passed something called the Building Energy Performance Standard, which is a required cap on energy consumption for buildings 50,000 square feet and larger. We became the first city in the Midwest to actually implement that, but we are by far from the last. You can see here where this concept of building performance standards has already been adopted: Boston, New York, DC, St. Louis, the entire state of Colorado, and Washington. And of course, St. Louis is standing out here in the Midwest, but we also know that those benchmarking ordinances are a precursor, those disclosure requirements are a precursor to the standards, and those benchmarking policies are really, really taking hold of the nation. And so this is just the first wave. We're going to see this be the new norm, and the city of St. Louis is at the cutting edge of what is going to become a national standard. We know that this is a national movement too, as well, that the federal government is really supporting local, municipal, and state performance standards. They developed a coalition earlier this year. Both St. Louis and Kansas City are in that coalition, but you can see here from this map what other cities and states are involved in making a pledge to pass and adopt energy performance standards. How do we go about doing this? Who does this really impact in the city? There are close to 1,000 buildings, 983. It fluctuates actually as we kind of for various reasons, but right around 1,000 buildings in the city of St. Louis have that 50,000 square feet of total space that makes them that makes these regulations apply to them. The building division, the regulation is housed within that division, and they've divided the properties out into property types and set a standard for each of those property types such that 65% of all buildings are going to have to do something to reduce their energy consumption. So the standard was set pretty ambitiously at that 35% mark, which means that 65% of our large buildings here in the city of St. Louis are going to have to do something significant to reduce their energy consumption to get compliant with the law. It does vary by building type, as I mentioned, which is a good thing. And it's also it is also reliant on the city of St. Louis's data itself. Our buildings are less efficient than the national average. And so using our local data makes it more reasonable to be able to apply. So you can see here that, for example, in our laboratory space, our buildings are great, use a lot more energy than the national standard, the national average. So using our local data gives us a benchmark that's really achievable. And as you can see here, it also varies pretty significantly by building type. And so having that variance really allows for building owners to get compliant in a reasonable way. It's right around the corner, the compliance requirements. 2025 is the first year that you've got to have the compliance. You've got to have your building up to par by, and that is reliant on the year before's data. So really, we've got just a couple of years to educate property owners, building managers, and property owners about these requirements, make the investments, and get the energy use down, reducing the carbon footprint of our community. In interest of time, I'm going to skip through the compliance pathways because I want to leave enough time for questions here to go through WINCO's presentation. But the big question really on everybody's mind should be, maybe, can this actually be done? And quite frankly, City Hall got compliant with the benchmark. And if City Hall can do it, that big old inefficient building, anyone can. But the other big question is, how are we all going to pay for this? Well, the good news is that investing in energy efficiency upgrades makes financial sense. This isn't just the good news, it's the important news. It has to make financial sense for the property owner, or it's going to be very, very difficult. We know from case studies that time and time again, making these investments makes a lot of financial sense. For example, this is a building in St. Louis downtown, a very large building, 450,000 square feet, invested $1.6 million into changing out their pneumatic controls, replacing them with an automation control system, utilized an Ameren incentive of $400,000, and on the back end, very quickly started to realize $425,000 in energy savings on an annual basis. This resulted in a payback at less than 3 years. So many of these investments make financial sense. The Building Energy Exchange is here to help identify those, connecting property owners and property managers with the tools and the resources and the providers that can actually get this done and help achieve those energy reductions and those financial savings. We've got great partners here in St. Louis. We're very lucky that we've got utilities that are really stepping up at the table with incentives and ready to deploy those. And we've got a rate structure here in Missouri that empowers those utility companies to actually do that. We've also got state law that enables PACE lending, which is a lending product that can ride alongside of your property taxes and not disrupt your financial stack directly. And we're working with our local banking industry to come up with some alternative green banking products that will be innovative in this space and mirror some of what's going on in other cities and states to address the need for creative financing in the energy efficiency space. So the Building Energy Exchange here, we are a hub, we are a connecting unit. We are really grown out of the standards, and really we've got some great partners that are funding us and that are working with us to help identify some of that low-hanging fruit within our community to reduce our collective carbon footprint. The USGBC, we are a project of the US Green Building Council, and we've got some major funding from some of our great partners, Ameren Inspire, Washington University, and some of the leaders here in the energy efficiency space. I want to mention that we're not operating in a vacuum. We are working with sister organizations in Kansas City, New York, and Washington, D.C., and that really gives us a leg up on some of the best practices nationally on what's going on in the energy efficiency space. So we're here to help. And what we're looking for from folks to get involved would be to showcase other great projects that have reduced energy consumption. We're looking for partners to help identify those great partners here in St. Louis that can actually do the work in our built environment. And of course, we're here to answer your questions and be a resource and to hear your concerns. And that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Kurtis.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate the introduction earlier, and thanks to Alderwoman Spencer. That's a tough act to follow, but I really appreciate what you and your team are doing, and that's inspiring work. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group today. Thanks to the World Trade Center St. Louis, and congratulations again on getting the award for the WTCA Champion Award for 2022. That's exciting news to have on this beautiful Earth Day. So what I wanted to talk about today is actually tailing off of what Alderwoman Spencer was talking about. There's obviously some great incentives that she and the team have put together for the city of St. Louis specifically. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and how that affects the other trends that we are seeing both domestically and globally, what we're seeing as well. And talk about maybe a few other case studies that we can point to locally for other success projects and inspire building owners on what they can do to help reduce their carbon footprint. So we're talking about sustainability in St. Louis and around the world. Three things I'm going to talk about are the industry trends, what we are seeing in the construction industry for new and existing building stock, new technologies and innovative ways to utilize them, and then of course we'll end up with a local case study. So what is it that we're seeing nowadays? The biggest source of CO2 emissions, just like Alderwoman Spencer had mentioned before, are buildings. Buildings emit most of their emissions through two main components. That's the windows inside of the wall envelope and the HVAC system. Those are the two main contributors on most buildings. An interesting fact, like was mentioned before, the greenest building is one that's already built. A new building that is 30% more efficient than an average building can take up to 80 years to overcome the negative climate change impact resulting from construction. So obviously, anything that we can do to help improve our existing building stock and improve that efficiency is one of our main goals in order to reduce the overall carbon footprint that we're looking at. One of the big trends that we're seeing in renovations because of that. I'm going to talk specifically about windows as a window manufacturer based here in University City. So we know what the city of St. Louis is dealing with and also globally what we're seeing. Most windows that were installed, especially before 1980, for example, are going to have one piece of glass. That's a single pane of glass. Now, if you go out and get one, typically they'll have two or even three pieces of glass, and they'll have a special coating on them to make them even more thermally efficient. So those single pane pieces of glass are 20 times less efficient than an insulated wall, right? And single pane windows can also have 90% of the building's energy generated that go out the window. And so, unfortunately, what we've seen is that in that existing building stock, globally, 60% of buildings still have single pane windows in them. Well, what can we do to fix that? Obviously, there's fenestration replacement, and fenestration, if you're not familiar with it, is just a fancy word for windows and doors and holes in a building. Now, the other ways that we look at achieving renovations is automated lighting controls. That's where we can use wireless or wired technology to implement sensors into even existing buildings to reduce the artificial load on a building. Artificial lighting. Artificial lighting will not only create extra heat that the building then has to cool off in a commercial structure especially, but it also doesn't take into advantage the solar heat that's coming in from outside of the windows. And of course, lighting replacement, especially if they can keep the existing systems that are in place and then replace with more efficient lighting, that's a big opportunity for renovations in existing buildings. And then of course, installing storm windows. You'll see these a lot of times on the exterior of homes, or they can also be installed in the interior. When they're installed in the interior, they can actually have automated shades and sensors built in. So you can have an existing building that can have these interior storm sashes installed behind the window and automatically increase your efficiency because you have automated shades and sensors built into that system. There's also other incentives that we see as a big trend in the industry. There's several incentives that a lot of times we don't see building owners taking nearly enough advantage of. The first is tenant improvement. And tenant improvement, for example, if you upgrade your building envelope, say you have old leaky, drafty doors and windows and cracks in the interface between the two, you're not going to be able to use the same floor space that is there, especially say in an office building. So you actually can see a net increase in usable floor space by up to 20% by replacing those exterior building envelope systems. The other is utilizing those systems and making them as efficient as possible and partnering with the utilities, just like the partners that Alderwoman Spencer talked about with Spire and Ameren that we have here. They have incentives available and they have those knowledge-based resources that we need to partner with as a design team. And that leads me to my next point, is those design partnerships. Working with the end user and partnering with the supplier and the manufacturer and design consultants to have those conversations early in the design stages to talk about what might be possible and come up with a good solution that's not only good in the long term, it's easy to install, is not overly complicated, and it can be designed to the maximum efficiency. But the only way that can happen is by having those conversations early in the design stage so that we can have those good partnerships and utilize those resources that are available to us. And then the other big one that I see, especially in the city of St. Louis and other large cities, is historic renovation tax credits. Both the state and the federal can provide tax credits up to 40% of not only the product itself, but the installation or the project cost. So that can add up to a meaningful amount of money. And so not only are you going to save money on your energy efficiency, but you also can see some tax incentives and rebates come back on the federal and state side. So those are another set of big incentives that we are not seeing utilized as much as maybe they could be with a lot of building owners. So let's talk about some new technologies that we're seeing in the construction industry. An example is a net zero building. This is a picture of a project. This is a commercial existing building. Now this is in San Francisco, but it's a net zero building, meaning that it uses as much energy and takes in as much energy as it puts back to the grid. So it zeroes out to essentially having no energy usage. It's possible to do this in an existing retrofit commercial construction. It takes a lot of partnerships and smart systems that work together to make sure the building is operating as efficiently as possible. But it can be done, and it can be done on a budget-friendly basis. That's exciting to see that be achievable. One of the ways that this is done is through a dynamic building envelope. So the ideal envelope is not going to be the same throughout the year. It will actually change throughout the year, and it'll have dynamic variables to bring in, for example, more light and more heat in the wintertime naturally, and block out that heat in those hot, humid months of August that we're all familiar with. We also see this by using passive heating and passive cooling and thermal mass loads, where you can have these buildings that can hold on to the temperature, especially the heat in the wintertime, But that can only be done if the design is done properly, especially on renovations. So that dynamic building envelope is something we're seeing more often. We're seeing more and more technologies being developed in the construction building product space. Every year there's more patents that we're seeing being applied. So the industry is continuing to push further and further these new technologies. For example, one of those things that we're seeing on our side in particular is something called building integrated photovoltaics, or BPIV. This is where you can have photovoltaics that take in energy from the sun and convert it to electricity. And that can be done where it's tied into the building envelope, not just the walls and the roof, but we're also seeing that used in windows that are still transparent that you can still see through. But they are not only providing good views of your environment, but they're also bringing in energy to the building. So that's something those BPIVs we're seeing as well. We're also seeing a lot of examples on historic buildings. And one of the ones I wanted to talk about is a local case study. So we are at Skinker and Olive here in New City, but just south of us is a project that went through this we're gonna talk about. One of the things that people ask us about is payback periods. What's that ROI gonna look like? And sometimes the ROI is not just gonna be measured in years, but it's also gonna be measured in comfort. That's gonna be, for example, air infiltration, sound infiltration, or what they call sound attenuation. Ventilation, if you can provide natural ventilation, that's going to be great in those times of the year where you can have passive ventilation and not have to use the forced air. And of course, daylighting to bring in the heat in the solar control in the wintertime naturally. And also, you can reduce your amount of artificial lighting if you can bring in daylighting properly. And that's where you can see that usable floor space increase of up to 20%. The other thing that helps is UV protection. If you put in the right types of systems in your building envelope, it can actually reduce the amount of UV degradation on the interior furnishings on the building, saving even more money. So it's not just ROI that we're seeing from the windows themselves, but from the other ancillary components and accessories that come with that. This is an example, that project I mentioned. This is at 801 South Skinker, just overlooks Forest Park, right by that giant Amoco sign off 6440. Originally, the building had non-thermal aluminum frames. On the left side, you will see a picture of a non-thermal frame that doesn't have the insulation between the outside and the inside. And when you have an aluminum frame, it's just like if you hold an aluminum can on a hot summer day, your hand will get very cold because the aluminum conducts electricity, conducts heat. And so the way that we can stop that is put a thermal break or a thermal debridge. So this is one of those technological advances that we're seeing to improve the thermal break inside of commercial framing systems. So the picture in the middle shows what that thermal break does, especially with insulated glass. You can see the big difference, where that red is the warm side and the blue is the cold side. So you can see a big difference in that. So these frames were then installed into this project, and they were installed completely from the outside. So rather than disturbing tenants on the interior, these were done completely on the outside. These are some pictures taken during the construction phase, and they were actually installed from the outside parapets. And so the interior furnishings were disturbed very little. They were able to put up a protective wall inside of each of the units and access and demolish the old systems and install the new systems from the outside. After this was installed, after the first year, according to the resident member of the co-op board, they were able to save $100,000 in energy savings throughout all 12 months, and the project cost was just over about $2.2 million. The property manager noted that the window system insulated 3.5 times better than the old single pane windows. And so they had a lot less heat in the winter and a lot less solar heat gain from the sun in the summertime. So they ended up with a bottom line energy savings of almost 50% in utility costs. That's huge on a building that has this much glass on it. So this is a great example that we talked about before, just like the example that Alderwoman Spencer mentioned earlier. There are advantages to not only have a high energy savings and good ROI, but also to be a good climate partner and reduce our carbon footprint. So that is our presentation, and at this time, we'd like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you so much, Kurtis and Alderwoman Spencer. I loved that the greenest building is the building that's already built, and there'll be a quiz later on the new terms that Kurtis has shared with us. Fenestration and dynamic building envelope are two I think I'm going to have to look up. So thank you both so much. Just a reminder. If you do wish to ask questions, please do so via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens, and so we'll dive right in here. And we have a comment from one of our participants saying super interesting. So so well done, panelists. All right, so maybe we'll start with you, Alderwoman Spencer. Do you see attitudes towards climate change evolving in St. Louis through the course of your work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, even just a few years ago, when we first were discussing benchmarking as a required energy disclosure, there was a lack of a real, nobody really cared about sustainability. And now it's really top of mind for everyone. I mentioned, for millennials, but also, folks are really trying to reach their ESG goals. This is very, very important from a, company success perspective. So absolutely, I think it's changing in every single sector, every in every demographic. It's absolutely shifted tremendously.
That's good to hear. And I guess, Kurtis, same question to you.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Alderwoman Spencer. One of the examples I saw of that, I was recently able to attend the National Building Envelope Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, just a couple weeks ago, actually. And they did a presentation on cities that were implementing these kind of national standards. And I think there's maybe 6 or 7 out there, and they pointed to St. Louis as one of the top. And so it's really great to see that we're getting that national recognition for taking those strong incentives. And so that's great to see that our building energy exchange is getting that national recognition.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Which leads to another question. This is directed to you, Alderwoman Spencer. Why did the city of St. Louis take on this challenge? And isn't this really kind of a heavy lift for a region such as ours?
Yeah, St. Louis took on this challenge. We have a lot of folks. This really was led under the previous administration. We had a mayor who really cared about the climate. We had a green sort of council at the board. So there are policymakers that really supported it. But there's a lot of folks in the general public, the U.S. Green Building Council, Spire, Ameren. There were great partners that really helped make this happen and did a lot of community outreach to building owners, property owners, and organizations before getting this passed. So I think there was a real willingness on the part of a lot of advocacy organizations and organizations in general to get this done. But your question about whether or not this is a big lift, I mean, look, it is a big lift. Reducing the energy consumption of 65% of buildings is a big lift. But I would argue that not lifting at all is just setting us back. I mean, the city of St. Louis, the region is behind in every single metric, and we cannot afford to be behind in this one too. The sustainability, climate change is one of the top motivating factors for people in general. So if St. Louis doesn't grab a hold of this and move forward, we are only setting ourselves back. I think we can't afford not to.
Very good point. Kurtis, anything to add there?
No, I think that covered it all. That's great. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So Kurtis, a question for you. What trends are you seeing in the industry at present, and how do those trends compare globally? I know, we always hear about Europe being so far ahead and the Nordic countries are so far ahead. And so how do our trends here in the US compare?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We had seen Europe lead in the construction products industry as well. I think because some of their utility costs are higher, they are incentivized more to put in more investment into their systems. And so we are starting to see those systems are being used here domestically. A lot of that technology has been moved and is being implemented. It's in the East Coast and starting to make its way here. So we're glad to see that we're developing those technologies and using those existing technologies and new technologies together to provide innovative, kind of customized solutions that can meet the building owner's needs domestically.
Great, thank you. I think we have another question from the audience here, and this is for you, Kurtis. I've heard of using blinds within a window system. I'm wondering what other shading systems are available that are encapsulated within the window. So kind of a specific question there.
Yeah, we're seeing that more specifically used where the building owners are concerned not about just the energy cost, but the maintenance cost as well. And so for hospitals, for example, we'll see where they're trying to reduce the amount of materials that are exposed to the inside. And so they're encapsulating as many systems as they can to be behind protective layers. And so they're doing that because it not only saves energy, but it also reduces their overall maintenance costs throughout the year. And so, yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of the ways that we can use existing solutions to help provide, multiple answers to our building owners. So that's great.
All right, great, thank you. I think we have another question here. And yes, so this is a comment. Alderwoman Spencer recently presented this information to our economic development partners. I found it very interesting that we can leverage St. Louis's leadership in this space to drive new investment, especially globally climate-minded companies. Can you share, Alderwoman Spencer, can you share a little more about how this could benefit us economically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. Rebranding ourselves as a sustainable city, being ready to, having our built environment start to address the carbon footprint that we collectively are contributing to. I mean, the first step really is to start to bring down that 80% of our carbon footprint coming from buildings. We have to move in the direction of a sustainable city. I think collectively focusing on this, addressing all the low-hanging fruit, and making some real changes in the built environment so that we can start to see some real changes bringing that down. I think championing what St. Louis is doing, being at the forefront, as Kurtis mentioned, of the energy performance standards, and really continuing to talk about and showcase the great work we're doing. Not only do we have the bones for the infrastructure, we have phenomenal local providers. Like the windows that WINCO is making are not only energy efficient, they're absolutely gorgeous. And the facility and the production is absolutely incredible. I've had the opportunity to go and check it out. And we have other providers. Emerson, with the automation controls, is headquartered here. We have Guarantee Electric. We have Carbon Cure is, Breckenridge Concrete actually recarbonizes concrete. There is some really incredible locally grown products that we can use to do this, and then actually, those products are not just used in St. Louis. So we have championing the sustainability aspect of what we're doing to our built environment. The companies that we have here that are producing those products is absolutely a path for growth for us.
Great endorsement there, Kurtis. You might need to use that one in the future. Alderwoman Spencer, we'll stay with you for just a moment. By now, we're all familiar with the term climate migrants to indicate people who have to flee their homes because of the impacts of climate change. But isn't sustainability also a climate equity issue, both here at home and abroad?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we're well positioned to receive climate migrants. For one thing, we're not really susceptible to massive shifts and like you see on the coast and along the ocean fronts. So we have that really going for us, and it is an issue of equity. Addressing our carbon footprint here, where we live, it will make our air quality better and make our community healthier and safer for everyone. It's also, focusing on those affordable housing, the multifamily housing community, the most vulnerable. What we're doing is focusing on trying to make those energy efficiency upgrades, financially feasible for some of our low-income residents. Because at the end of the day, those folks are often, burdened by their utility bills. Like many of us enjoy being able to just pay our electric bill. For many families, that's a real challenge. And so investing in those, in those communities and energy efficiency there is absolutely important. And I have to give credit to our utilities who really focus a lot of their incentives in equitable ways and making sure that they go to those communities that need them most.
Well, that is certainly very good to hear. All right, we have a question from our International Business Development Manager, Susan. I think this is directed to you, Kurtis, as a member company. Kind of an obscure question because Susan mentions she's gotten the tour of your facility and she knows you have breach-proof glass windows. I wonder whether those doors are also energy efficient, or do you have to make a trade-off between security and energy efficiency?
Oh, Susan's always trying to keep me on my toes. A little pop quiz
Me
here.
too, Kurtis. Me too.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I think whenever we're looking at either new construction or renovation, there are all kinds of new codes that are being required, whether it's seismic resistant or blast resistant, ballistic resistant. But the number one thing that a lot of people are looking for is energy resistance. I mean, energy savings. And so that's the number one thing in those designs. So yeah, whenever we're designing a system like that, the first thing we're looking at is making sure that it's thermally efficient. That's really step one for us. And so everything else kind of falls below that and can be still integrated without compromising that initial goal. So yeah, that's a great question, Susan.
And she also has a follow-up comment. Halcyon shades can put the blinds inside the windows using NASA technology, which actually leads to our next question. And this is for you, Kurtis, too. What role does technology play in sustainability, and how can we leverage it to our advantage in terms of infrastructure and the built environment?
Yeah, I think just to spin off of that, actually, the company that was mentioned, Halcyon, is a locally owned company as well that we've partnered with. So just like Alderwoman Spencer mentioned before, there's a lot of these resources are right here in our own backyard, and they have those answers that we're looking for. I think to answer your question, it's up to us in the industry to listen to building owners, to what their needs are. You know, we can't sit back here and work in our own labs and our own R&D departments and come up with these crazy ideas that maybe somebody doesn't even need. We have to listen to those 1,000 building owners that are out there in just the city of St. Louis and hear what their challenges are, and come up with solutions that are simple. They don't have to be over the top things that can really achieve their goals, but it's about hearing what their challenges are, hearing what their issues are, and listening, and then developing solutions in conjunction with that partnership.
Great, thank you. So a question directed to both of you. The theme, of course, for this year's Earth Day is Invest in Our Planet. How can your respective organizations play a role in ensuring sustainability stays front and center for business and building owners going forward? So Alderwoman Spencer, maybe I'll kick that over to you first.
Sure. I mean, I think just, being present and continuing to communicate about it. We are taking every opportunity to speak about, the importance of energy efficiency and investing in our built environment. And that looks like, accepting every single invitation, but continue to knock on the doors of our media and to spread the word. So we're going to continue to do that. We're also going to be doing some direct outreach to building owners and property owners in an educational sense. So working with our building division, the enforcement agency, and working with property owners is kind of how we're focusing our efforts.
And I guess events such as Earth Day help as well, hopefully in some small way. Kurtis, same question to you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, just like I said before, it's about us listening to those local building owners and partnering with people like the Building Energy Exchange to come up with those solutions, to make those connections and have those meaningful conversations.
Great, thank you. All right, a question from Kathy to Kurtis. Can the lighting control be incorporated into the general building control system?
We have seen on new construction, they can tie in lighting controls that can help maintain the efficiency throughout the day. So especially in new construction, we'll see building control systems. You actually can also do that on existing construction, where they can still make it retrofit and have those lighting systems talk to each other and be smart with simple sensors built in. So it doesn't have to be an overly complicated building management system in new construction. You can still achieve those things even using existing technologies without having to tear out your walls and systems to put those new technologies in place, those new sensors. So thanks for that question, Kathy.
All right, and a question from our executive director. How can we get more involved locally? As citizens who love this city, what are concrete things we can do to support your work? Alderwoman Spencer, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. I mean, for the Building Energy Exchange, there is so much you can do. We are looking for case studies, specific investments and good folks that are making those investments and showcasing them. We're looking for partnership. We're looking for who is providing those services. We're looking for speaking opportunities. We're looking for connections. all of the above. So, you know, property owners connecting us in, connecting us in with partners, and those connections are super helpful. Any speaking engagement, any opportunity to talk about sustainability and the built environment and energy efficiency is welcome to the Building Energy Exchange.
Fantastic. And
Yeah, I would
Kurtis,
agree.
same question to you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think events like this, like the Engage in Trade series that we've got today, this Earth Day celebration, those kind of events and those kind of networking events that we see kind of returning more and more in person over the summer, especially. I think wherever we can have those interactions and spread the good news and let people know what we're doing, and that there's carrots out there and there's incentive out there to make this worth everybody's while. I think that's great.
All right, and I think we have another question here. Is there any push to make public school buildings more efficient? Maybe we'll direct that one to you, Alderwoman Spencer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are taking a look at all of the schools in the St. Louis city area. I mean, we've got about between 70 and 80 school buildings that fit the requirements. So we're looking at the energy consumption of those, and absolutely our St. Louis public schools have a lot of work to do. There's also a ton of opportunities with federal funding right now coming down the pipeline for schools. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars nationally. And so, you know, it is important, I think, we are looking for some more engagement there so that we can make sure that we are maximizing the amount of money that can come to St. Louis city schools through those federal programs. And that's an area of focus for us. Absolutely.
For sure, yes, and an important reminder that the funding is available now, and so now is the time to apply for it and use it. As I think you alluded to that as well, Kurtis, in your presentation, that maybe people aren't aware that the incentives are out there. Another question to you, Kurtis: can these controls be built in for retrofit window shading devices as well?
Yeah, so they can be done on the inside of a building, and they can be installed wirelessly, and so they don't have to be installed into the building management system. They can be done retroactively. Yeah.
And another question: what are some of the low-hanging fruit examples? And I think that may have alluded to what we were talking about earlier in terms of what people can do, that's kind of low-hanging fruit, that's easy for them to start off with, maybe.
I think there was an example that Alderwoman Spencer mentioned before too, where they were upgrading the pneumatic control devices for the HVAC system. That's one of the big contributors we mentioned before, not only the fenestration, but also the HVAC. So those are things that need to be focused on, along with roof and wall insulation. Those are some of the big things, along with lighting we mentioned before. I think those are what we're typically seeing these building owners focus on first.
Mm-hmm. That 801 skinker that Kurtis mentioned is also right now upgrading their automation controls. And that's something that has a huge return, and taking a look at the size of your HVAC. A lot of times, buildings, especially in the 80s and 90s, the HVAC systems were sized for the maximum load days, which would be the hottest day of the year. And really, if you break that system down and have a much smaller unit, you can use 90% of the days, and then just have an auxiliary system for those additional days. It cuts down the overall usage for the bulk of the year significantly. So it's really important to just have take a quick audit of what you're doing. You can have a full energy audit. We're looking at connecting building owners and property owners with just quick overviews, looking for that low-hanging fruit. It really depends case by case. Sometimes lighting still hasn't been updated, and that's an enormous, usually less than 1 year payback period. Those are low-hanging fruits that we really need to make sure that have been implemented in every building in St. Louis.
Wonderful. Some great advice there. I feel like we could go on talking to both of you for the remainder of the afternoon here. Thank you so much for this informative session. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I will be taking out the dictionary later, Kurtis, to look up those terms. I'll end just with a quote from the Earth Day website. For Earth Day 2022, we need to act boldly, innovate broadly, and implement equitably. It's going to take all of us, all in, businesses, governments, and citizens, everyone accounted for and everyone accountable, a partnership for the planet. So with those inspirational words, hopefully on this Earth Day, we'll go out and start working on some of those low-hanging fruit ideas that the panelists provided. Thank you also to our attendees for joining us today. Don't forget to join us next month for the next event in the series. Those details will be hitting your inboxes soon. And in the interim, stay safe and take care, and happy Earth Day weekend, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Happy Earth Day.